So welcome everybody. Welcome to the Bonkers Brit podcast. I'm trying out this live podcast as well, so I might be putting this on YouTube. But my guest today is my very good friend, Mary Carouba. So I met Mary through storytelling. And we'll go through exactly where we met in just a moment. But she likes storytelling because it involves the thing she loves doing most, which is talking. I can't imagine why Mary and I get on well. She also likes to make people laugh and creatively expressing herself. She also has been a keynote presenter many times, many organizations. She's a TEDx speaker, a comedian, and, as I said, award-winning storyteller. And she also co-authored the book, Women at Ground Zero. And in her previous life, if God, you can imagine she's done so much, she was a retired investigative social worker. So we'll go through some of those in a while. So welcome, Mary.
Hello, Claire. Hello.
It's so nice to see you again, but obviously we're just sheltering at home in our own little living rooms.
Yeah, and I promise during this podcast not to imitate your accent badly at all.
Very good. Glad to hear it. Bloody
I've got that all sorted out. Yes, that all
you
sorted.
watched too many Mary Poppins when you were younger. That's a trouble.
It's so lovely, it's so lovely.
So I would recommend everyone going to Mary Carouba's website, which is marycarouba.com, CAROUBA.com, and listening to her TEDx talk, which is only like 12 minutes long. And it's such a lovely TEDx talk. I really enjoyed listening to it. And one of the things that Mary talks about is doing 100 acts of kindness. And at this particular point in the world and what's happening with the pandemic, I think that's a particularly excellent sentiment. So do you want to just talk about that a bit, Mary?
Yes, and I will say if anybody goes to my website, please forgive the fact that it's outdated because my website person ghosted me. And I guess this is something young people do now. I wasn't familiar. I thought if you wanted to quit a job, you might say, I think I'd like to not do this any longer. But she just became invisible. And I have this website. I have no idea what to do with it. So I need to find somebody that can actually put things on it, change things, do all of that.
Mary.
Yes, I know.
Oh, well, then there's any website, intrepid website designers out there, get in touch.
Yes, thank you. And it's not too out of date because she just ghosted me last week. So it's not too bad yet.
So what did you do to upset her, Mary?
I don't know. I think it's the times. I really do. I think everybody's going a little bit mad right now.
Yeah.
And people are having issues for sure.
Yeah, it is a bit crazy. I mean, I'm personally loving it myself. I think it's a really great time. They've just got me and my husband at home. We get on very well. And I haven't got the kids causing me crazy because they've all left home. So I can just talk to them when I feel like it. And if I don't feel like talking to them, I don't pick up my phone. It's lovely.
I'll tell you though, I've never been happier to be single with the dog. Right now, I feel like I've got the perfect scenario.
Definitely. Animals are the best, aren't they? They don't answer back.
Yes, and the thing is, she's so joyful every single morning. Like I wake up on some mornings and I'm like, the pandemic, this again, we're all at home. My dog wakes up every single morning brimming with joy for life. So everybody should have that in their house, I think,
Dogs are particularly good at welcoming you as well, aren't they? I'm so happy to see you.
She's so thrilled. I leave for 2 minutes. I come back. She's out of her mind, delirious to see me again. It's nice.
See, I'm a cat person. I've got 2 cats and they're not quite so happy to see me. Well, they are, but one cat's more than the other. But what they have is the added attraction of bringing in mice and rats into the house and dropping them alive in our house. And then we can't find them for days on end. Yesterday, my husband picked up the recycling basket that we have in our kitchen to take it to the recycling bin outside. And as he took it outside, a rat jumped out of it and ran off. I know, horrible. But at least we knew where it was and it was outside, not inside anymore.
I had a completely irrational reaction to my cat bringing a rat into my house. I walked in the living room, saw this huge dead rat, and I started bundling it in towels and blankets. Don't ask me why. I was afraid to touch it. So I ended up with a pile of blankets and towels around this one little rat and put the whole thing in a dumpster. Towels, blankets. Afterwards, I was like, why did I throw away all my towels and blankets?
But that is a little bit odd, I have to say.
normal person would maybe pick it up by the tail and, give it a chuck over the fence. But I had to create an entire drama around it.
How funny. Well, I don't actually prefer it when they are dead, because then I can get them really easily and take them outside, put them in the dumpster. 9 times out of 10, our cats just bring them in, drop them, and then get bored. And they run, and we open the door, and they run out. It's like, no, get the bloody rat. And I don't like to kill them personally. I don't like vermin, but I don't want to kill them. So then my husband and I have concocted this really convoluted way with cardboard boxes and bits of wood and of like this tunnel, and we got a broom, and they often hide underneath the bloody fridge. And it's really difficult. We have to and then they run along this little corridor and then pop out the back door.
It's really funny. I have squirrels in my backyard, and I just adore watching them. I have all kinds of squirrel feeders set up and all sorts of little things to entertain them and entertain me. And I just love these squirrels in the backyard. And I look at them and think, why do I love them so much more than a rat? Because they're simply the same thing with the fluffy tail, right?
I think it is the tail. I've decided, for me, it's the tail that really makes me freaked out by it. It's disgusting, their tails.
Well, you mean rats?
Yeah, rats' tails. Squirrels are lovely, but rats, ugh.
Yeah.
And they don't hop invitingly like a Disney cartoon. They scuttle, don't they, on their horrible little feet?
Yeah, they're always like getting away with something. That's the thing. A rat energy is always like, I'm going to get away.
Yes.
And squirrels are more like, we're going to hop around. It's just a different energy. Yeah.
But that's what we think, anyway. Probably they're not.
Yeah. I'm sure they're all thinking the same thing. Food.
Yeah. Yes.
Food and sex. Yeah.
Which is just like me during coronavirus. I go to the fridge and go, food. Anyway, we've digressed quite a lot from 100 acts of kindness, because I don't think killing rats is really 100 acts of kindness, although possibly for some.
The thing with my 100 acts of kindness was after I had a liver transplant. And this liver transplant, my life was saved by a 13-year-old boy who died in a car accident. He was actually 14, I'm sorry, when he died. And a year before he died, he had popped up at his parents' dinner table and said, I want to donate my organs if anything ever happens to me. And both of his parents, who were Russian immigrants, they just come from Russia a couple of years before, they said, no, we don't do that. We don't donate organs. And he insisted. He sat at the table and wouldn't get up till both his parents promised they would donate his organs. And exactly a year later, when they were on their way to Yosemite on a family vacation, they were hit by a big rig truck, and Ellie was brain dead. His name was Mary Carouba. He was brain dead immediately. And the next morning, the doctors told his parents, there's no coming back from this. I'm sorry. Would you like to donate his organs? And his mother initially said, no, we don't do that. And the dad and the sister and the brother reminded her of the promise she had made to Ellie a year earlier. And so she said yes. And then I received a phone call where I was at home dying in Santa Rosa, just on the edge, clinging to the edge of life, and was rushed down to UCSF in San Francisco. And in a matter of 12 hours from the moment I got there till I got out of surgery, my entire life was given back to me. Just my entire life. I was so close to being on my way out. I had so kind of let go of this life, and to come back into life again was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever experienced. And so I had this depth of gratitude. I remember writing to Ellie's parents to thank them, and how difficult it was. How do you thank two parents that made the hardest decision of their lives on the worst day of their lives, and in the process saved my life? How do you thank them? And I felt there was no thank you big enough. And so that's why I took on the 100 Acts of Kindness project, to do 100 acts of kindness out in the world as a way to say my thank you.
God, what a story, Mary. Well, it's a lovely thing to do, and how appropriate as well. But how amazing that a 14 or 13-year-old boy at the time would insist that his parents donate, and then it was almost like that was his purpose this lifetime.
And it was out of the blue. It was, they were from Russia. This wasn't part of their experience, and that wasn't part of his experience growing up to know about organ donations and all that. And he wasn't even old enough to drive yet, so he hadn't come to that moment where you make the decision, to put that on your license. And they said it was just so odd that it just sort of popped up out of nowhere, and he just wouldn't let it go. And Ellie, this young boy, a kid, he loved a stranger that much. And it's really stayed with me. It's a big...
Do you think that we've all got sort of angels that look after us? And I do believe that we have many lives. So, each one's just a flicker of a second. So really, from a flicker of a second point of view, it's, yeah, sure, I'll do that for you. I'll come and give you an organ. But when you're actually living it and experiencing it, it's something else. And I just find it really magical when you hear stories like that. And then it just makes me feel much more optimistic about the whole world. Is that
I totally believe it too. I mean, one reason that I don't hold any hard feelings for anything that happened to me in my childhood or my past history is that I believe strongly that we're all in control of our own destinies at some level, at the soul level of existence, and that our soul is sort of overseeing this human experience that we're having. Yes. And I do think I made decisions before I came into this world. I must have been feeling very confident. That's all I can say. That's all I can say. I don't know what the hell I was thinking, honestly. I must have just been feeling like, yeah, I'll take that on. Hey, you know what? Give me some life-threatening child abuse. That's going to help me grow. Wait, I know it. Life-threatening drug addiction. That'll do. I mean, it's like, I believe that I set all that up on the other side, but then you get here and it all starts happening to you. And you're like, what? Why did I think I could do this?
Yes, I agree. I totally agree. But let's delve into some of that then. So let's go back, if you don't mind, just talking about some of your childhood and some of the challenges, because I absolutely agree with you. I do believe that we choose our life, and we choose, I mean, maybe not this is, well, I don't know. I've got lots of different views, and let's not go into all those now, but I do agree generally that you choose your life and you choose the people you're going to have the life experiences with. And so Ellie, for example, could have been part of your soul group, and he agreed to do that. And I just find that's magical and lovely, and what a lovely kid.
I believe it. And, I love him so deeply. It's such a deep relationship with him that I know that it's a relationship that goes through lifetimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
It has to be, because he's a part of me. It's such an odd thing, really, Claire, to walk around with somebody else's liver inside of me, keeping me alive.
It is. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, how clever is that for a start? But it's kind of weird to think that it's somebody. Yeah, I agree. Like, somebody else's body is helping your body stay alive.
It's really, it's pretty miraculous, really, no matter how you define that word. It's pretty amazing. When I woke up after the surgery, and my sister came into the room and she said, "Oh my God, you have color in your face." It was the first time in several years that I even looked like I was alive. It was just like that.
God, it is miraculous, isn't it?
Quite a gift.
Yeah, bless him.
And I feel like every day is this sort of bonus time that I was given. I was 56 when I had the transplant. I'm 62 now. And, or maybe I was 54, because it's been about 8 years. And it changed my whole life. That's all I can say about that. And my childhood, you said you wanted to go back to that, right?
If you're happy to do that, yeah.
I am. I'm just trying to think of what's important to say about that and how it relates to everything else. But I, like a lot of people, had a very, very, very difficult childhood. And I was raised by two parents that, like a lot of young parents, really didn't know what they were doing. My father came from another country, and my father came from a country where women and men have a relationship that is completely unlike the relationship women and men have in the United States. So in the Middle East, where my father's from, men have complete dominion over women. And this just never sat right with me, ever. As a kid, I was pretty much born with the same personality I have now, the same sort of outgoing nature, the same curiosity, the same intensity. And as a kid, none of those features were valued to any degree within that culture. The only things that would have been valued would have been if I had been physically beautiful, modest and quiet and kind and subservient. The subservience to men is a big thing. And Claire, I just could never do it. I couldn't do, I
Thank
just
the Lord, eh?
I mean, as much as I might have wanted to fit into that world, I just couldn't do it. You know, like right now in this pandemic, I'm struggling because I have to clean my own house. And
Shock horror.
it's a horror because for me, I had such an ingrained message growing up that I gave myself that said, I'm never going to be like that. I'm never going to wait on people like that. I'm never going to just make my home under one roof and never go out. And, you know, all the things that I saw the women in that culture doing, I said, I refuse to do anything. Wouldn't cook, wouldn't clean, wouldn't serve men, wouldn't do any of it. And it really became quite a problem, but I just couldn't fit myself into that mold. So my father did what he had seen modeled to him his entire life. He did what he thought he was supposed to do in order to bring me under control, because the male ego in that culture is very connected to how much control they have over their family. And so he did what he thought he needed to do, and he used physical violence to try to control me, try to get me to do what he wanted me to do. And oh, Claire, the one thing that you should never really do to Mary Carouba is hit her. That's what we all discovered. That was, I mean, I do think that there are some people that maybe you hit them and they'll fall in line. And I had the exact opposite reaction and I went insane. I became like this feral child almost. My hair was always crazy. I was unkempt. I was dirty. I was like a feral child in a family of 5 kids. And I was the only one that looked the way I did and acted the way I did. I just stuck out like a sore thumb. And so the more violence was perpetrated on me, the more I acted out. The more I acted out, the more violence. And so it became life-threatening at a certain point. And I have permanent brain damage from a traumatic brain injury from getting kicked in the head and punched in the head and things like that when I was still really young and developing. So my memory is something that I've struggled with my entire life in a very serious way as a result of what happened back then. So the difficult childhood, the aggressiveness, the violence, the home that I was in, all of that sort of conspired together to create a set of circumstances in which I just basically exploded. I was kicked out of 13 schools. By the time I was 15, I was in and out of juvenile hall constantly. I was always running away. From 13 on, I was out on the freeway, putting my thumb out, trying to get somewhere else, anywhere else, trying to save my own life, you know? And then I was very lucky when I was young. I was declared incorrigible, which I really worked at. Thank you, Claire. I was declared incorrigible by the state of California and was
Sorry, can I stop you? So when you're declared incorrigible, that sounds like some, you know, Sound of Music type thing. So what does that actually mean?
Well, when they say you're incorrigible, it means that they can't get you to do anything they want you to do. That's what it means. Incorrigible means that they're telling you, look, I want you to go here, do this, sit there, do that, and you won't do any of those things. Incorrigible. And they were right. They were right. I was completely incorrigible. And so I was very lucky. At the time, I thought it was the greatest tragedy of my life. But when I was 13, I was sentenced to reform school for 2 years as a result of being declared incorrigible and made a ward of the court. And I spent 2 years in reform school that were actually very helpful, educational. I found out in reform school that I was smart. I had thought that I was developmentally disabled or something was wrong with me. I couldn't learn. I had straight Fs my entire life until I got to reform school. And then all of a sudden, with the structure there and the concern of the people who were there and some incredible people that work there, I found out I was smart and that I loved learning and that life was interesting and people weren't all terrible. And, you know, after reform school, I still had a lot of work to do and a long road to travel before I would find sobriety and find a healthy life. But I do think those 2 years gave me a little bit of a foundation to keep me alive long enough to, get me where I needed to go.
Oh, how amazing. Wow. I feel exhausted just listening to you. But after reform school, though, you were still a teenager, and then you did actually end up on the streets of San Francisco, didn't you?
Yes, I went home at 15 and a half. That's when I was released from reform school. I actually went home at about a little bit under 15 and a half. I remember because I was just counting the days to get my learner's permit to be able to drive, because at that time you had to be 15 and a half. Mm-hmm. And the day I turned 15 and a half, we went to Department of Motor Vehicles. I had to have my mom there. She signed off. I got my permit. I borrowed a car, drove away, and never looked back. No, I just drove. And in fact, I was such an idiot because I was just a kid. I didn't know anything. I'd never driven. No one had ever shown me anything. I just got this car. I borrowed a car from someone in the family and just took off. And I just drove literally till the engine froze, because I didn't know about little things like putting water in the radiator, things like that.
But 15, why would you? I don't know how you learned that. How did you even get to drive? I mean...
Well, I was stealing cars for a long time. I taught myself to drive by I say stealing cars like I'm some kind of high-level criminal. I snuck my father's car out in the middle of the night for years, and that's how I learned how to drive.
But that's actually very clever, because learning to drive, it's quite a skill, isn't it? It's not just...
Yeah, but I had 3 older brothers, and, they were all sneaky little, scamps too. And so they sort of helped because they were all learning how to drive. And then right. I was learning. Yeah.
So how did you get on with your brothers and sisters? I mean, how did they find it? Did they get as much, obviously probably not as much abuse as you, but did they get abuse too?
No, not at all. No, you'll find that in families where there's a real extreme level of dysfunction, there's usually very clearly defined roles in the family, and you can really break it down by these roles. Like there's usually a scapegoat in the family. What happens is these roles develop within a family in order to try to bring some sort of balance, because the family's out of balance, right? And nobody knows how to get it like this. So people sort of show up in different ways to try to bring balance, but nobody knows what the hell they're doing. So it's a weird out of balance. So you have a scapegoat. A lot of times you'll have like a hero kid in the family that does everything right. You'll have the mascot, the kid that makes everybody laugh. You have the lost child that's just really quiet, doesn't create a problem. You have these different roles that you see develop in families to try to create this balance. And my role was definitely the scapegoat. And the story was that I was the reason for my family's problems. And that if I wasn't so horrible, if I wasn't so disgusting, if I didn't act out so much, the family would not have the problems they had. And so that's what happens, Claire, is that, and I'll tell you another thing about the scapegoat. The scapegoat is the one that ends up later in life taking care of the family. It's always like that. And the reason why is the scapegoat was always the one that loved the family so much, they were willing to take everything on for the family. So that's why the scapegoat, when they're older, is always the one taking care of the elderly mom or the elderly dad that used to beat her or whatever. It's the scapegoat, because the scapegoat is always there trying to heal the family by taking on their pain. Wow. How's that for a little heavy?
Yeah, that's amazing. I suppose we didn't really have a scapegoat in my family because we didn't have that sort of scenario. But
if you have a healthy family, if you've got
I wouldn't say we had a healthy family necessarily. But
if you don't have real distorted dynamics, then you don't have a reason necessarily to create all those roles. People can be more fluid and be more themselves.
Yeah.
In a really
I've got 2 sisters, and my mum, my dad split up when I was quite young. Then we had a stepfather we hated, and then mum was, by herself. So really, it was my mum and my 3 sisters. So it was a very female orientated family, and our nucleus has always been the 4 of us. 3 kids and my mum. And my mum's been amazing. She's always treated us individually, but the same.
So were you guys more like, hey, we're all in this together?
Oh, totally. Yeah, no, totally. We're really bonded, and they're still, my 2 sisters are still my best friends, and I always talk to my mum and sisters every single week, and we get on really well. They're all my friends, which is, I know, I thought that was normal, and then I realized since I've grown up and become an adult that that's actually not normal. Yeah, I was just very lucky.
there's so much that happens with kids, because they're being raised by people that might not be completely well balanced themselves.
No, you don't have any qualifications to pop out a child, do you? There's out they come. If you want to adopt a dog or a cat or adopt a child, my God, you have to go through loops, which for children, I definitely think that's a good idea. But if you just can naturally have a child, then
Oh,
no.
I mean, that I used to work for Child Protective Services investigating child abuse, and it's just amazing to see like how many people have kids with absolutely no idea what to do with them. They don't even understand why they had them. They did it for all kinds of reasons that aren't necessarily healthy, and now they have a little human being in the world, and so you end up with a lot of CPS cases.
I think it's amazing that you and how appropriate in a way that you did go and work for Child Protective Services, because you had absolutely first-hand experience in how children can get abused in families, and so that you could look for things that perhaps I would not have looked for.
Well, you know what it is too, if you've been through it, then you have the capacity to deal with it without being completely horrified. And that counts for a lot because most people can't do CPS. I can't tell you the number of college graduates that came into the CPS office all excited because they're going to help people. And so they come in, they'd have their college degree in one hand and their basket of good intentions, in the other hand, and they're just ready to go, right? And within a week, 2 weeks, hey, where'd Margaret go? Oh, you didn't hear? She just walked out. This one woman, she was there 2 days. 2 days. And let me tell you something, Claire. They had a program back then where you could get your entire college education paid for if you only worked for the county for 3 years, right? So your whole college education paid for if you can just hang on to this job for 3 years. She gets in there 2 days. It's like, oh, where's Barbara? The new employee. Somebody goes over to her desk, opens the desk drawer. Her business card is in the desk drawer. Nothing else is in there. It's turned upside down, and on the back it says, "I quit." I mean,
Wow.
it's hard work. It's hard work. But if you've been all the way to that end of the spectrum in life, then you can travel there without getting too scared or too upset or too overwhelmed, right?
Yeah.
But it seemed to me that the only thing really worth doing in the world for a long time, I felt like the only thing worth doing was to help kids. I wanted to do the one thing that I always wanted somebody to do for me when I was a kid. And I remember when I was 8 or 9, something like that, looking up in the phone book, I looked up beatings, the word beatings, because I thought maybe there was someone I could call that could stop me from getting beat up all the time.
Wow. And did your mum never stop any of it? Or
No, my mom, God bless her. My mom was born and raised in an Irish Catholic family where all the power was with the men, just like it is in the Arab culture. And the priest walks in. I had an uncle, child molesting priest uncle, that every time he walked in the room, everybody would just practically genuflect. Father Jim, the child molester, is here. It was just like all the power given over. And so my mother really, and she had no marketable skills at all. She had 5 kids, 5 years in a row. She's with this domineering husband. There was no way out for her, she felt. And what I realize now, although it's hard to accept it, is I know that I was so difficult for her to deal with, so difficult that the beatings I got from him were also kind of from her. Do you know what I mean? They were sort of in it together about trying to do something about Mary. And so it just became a really contentious, really awful relationship for a long time. It took me many years to reestablish that relationship with them.
I think it's amazing that you actually did manage to establish a relationship, and you did. You have talked about it on other occasions about how you've forgiven your father and your mother.
Well, I'll tell you, if you really believe, as I do, that you make all of your own life choices and that it's not fate victimizing you, I don't feel like a victim in any sense of the word in regards to anything that's ever happened to me from the day I was born. I don't feel like a victim of that. When you feel like a victim, all your power goes to the other person.
That is true.
And that's how I lived for a long, long time. Oh my God, every time I forgot something, I would think, I don't want to say it because it involves a lot of swear words, but I would have these thoughts about them. Every time I forgot something, and Claire, I forget things 100 times a day. And so when I was dying, And I realized I didn't want to go into the next world with this thing that I still had with him. I embarked on this whole course of changing my thinking, changing my heart about him. And every time I would think about him and start to do the automatic, angry, upset message, I would change and give loving messages and understanding messages and compassionate messages, messages to heal that relationship. And it really did. Before he died, that relationship was healed, and my relationship with my mom is as well, because I'm not going to live as a victim. And if we all make our own choices, why am I blaming them?
Mm.
I thank them for being part of this intense life experience
Yeah.
that we came in and did together. I thank them for that, because it wasn't easy for them either.
Think of the spiritual growth you've had. I mean, that's quite intense and amazing, because to have that much abuse and come through it and then come out the other side and be loving and compassionate and kind and have forgiveness for that particular person or people, that's amazing spiritual growth for you. I mean,
It's a lifelong process, though, isn't it?
yeah,
Really.
oh God,
I mean, I'm 62 now, and this is still something I work on all the time. And I have post-traumatic stress stuff that sometimes rears its head a little bit. So it's something that I'll always be grappling with to some degree. But it's not because I'm holding any bad feelings toward anybody. You know, it's because the body remembers everything. And so a lot of times something will happen and my body reacts.
yeah.
Even my mind knows everything's fine. My body's like, we got to get the F out of here. And now, right? The body doesn't know. Yeah. So it was interesting. It was a lot of years of not speaking to them, a lot of years of not having any relationship whatsoever. And then it was a lot of years of tentatively just reestablishing those ties. And it's been very difficult. I mean, my mother literally for the first 10 years after we reconciled, and at the time I was doing a lot of performing and I was out in the world a lot. And people would say to my mother a lot, you know, oh, you must be so proud of Mary, or oh, Mary must have been such a great kid, or, you know, these people would say different, and she'd get so flustered. The first time somebody said to her, you must be so proud of Mary, I'm not kidding, Claire, she went, what? She looked around like, who? She couldn't believe somebody saying that to her about me. So
Wow.
it's taken her, and she really still believes that I was the problem. You know what I mean? And I have to completely accept that. She doesn't see a bigger picture. She thinks I just made her life miserable. So it's an ongoing healing, I would say.
Well, I'm just all props to you for even trying. You know, I think you're amazing. You're quite an inspiration.
Thanks,
And the
Claire.
other thing I want to get to, because your book, Women at Ground Zero, which I want to show everybody, Women at Ground Zero, this was quite an amazing book too, and very selfless, really. Do you want to just explain what
Well,
made
I'll tell you the motivation for the book. The book was about the women heroes at the World Trade Center on 9/11.
Mm.
Because after 9/11, my co-author Susan Hagen and I, we were watching the news a lot and following everything, and we noticed that all the language on the part of the politicians and the newscasters and the journalists was all the language was reverting back to the 60s, like policemen, firemen, our brave guys, the brotherhood of the fire department, everything, all the praise given for the new American hero after 9/11 was all toward the men. There was no mention made of women at all.
your childhood, really, eh?
What's that?
A bit like your childhood.
Right. And this is why I was drawn to do the book, because I have a really deep issue about being unseen, a really deep issue, because it's a very painful thing to go through an entire childhood never being seen for the loving, good, funny, wonderful person you really are. And I was seen my entire childhood as this disgusting, horrible, irritating, difficult problem, you know? And so it was, so had to be a lot of shifts in the way that I look at things. And one of the things that's happened is that I intensely see other people. I notice things about people. I sort of see people in the way that I had always hoped somebody would see me and help me. And so that's been a sort of a blessing and a curse. But when it came to the book, I saw all those women that nobody was talking about, it was like I could feel them. Like, what is it like for them? They went out and they risked their lives. Many of them are injured. Many of them are permanently injured. Like, I knew all that had to be happening. This is all happening, and nobody's even describing them by gender. They're not even saying the brave men and women at the World Trade Center. They're not even saying policemen and policewomen. It's all toward the men. President Bush came down. That was the night we decided to write the book. President Bush went down to the World Trade Center, puts his arm around this male firefighter and said that he went to New York to, find and praise all the brave men involved in the rescue and recovery efforts. And then Rudy Giuliani, who was exactly then who he is now, he stood on the rubble of the World Trade Center and asked everyone to give a round of applause for the men we've lost and the men that are searching for survivors, as women lay dead in that rubble behind him and women rescue workers were searching frantically, So my need to see people led to us going to New York, finding the women heroes, and then writing a book about their courage and their exploits on 9/11 called Women at Ground Zero, Stories of Courage and Compassion.
Such an amazing thing to do, and how lovely that you did see them. And you've got a couple of stories that you've told me, so I wouldn't mind you sharing at least one of them about how that was appreciated by the people that you did find.
Well, the women in New York, this is not, back then, back in 9/11, being a New York City cop was not the kind of job you took because it was glamorous or because people were going to think you were a hero. They just as soon spit in your face if you're a cop in New York than, buy you a cup of coffee. It's a very intense relationship between the police and the people there. And before 9/11, it wasn't the way that it is now. And so you had these very humble women that are not in it for the glory. They're not in it to be some big hero. They're just doing it because they're the kind of person that runs into the burning building instead of running out of it. They can't, that's their nature, that they want to rescue. And so they were very hurt that they weren't acknowledged at all by anybody ever. And they would have never said a word about it, ever. But the book ended up meaning a great deal to them. The first day that we got to New York, I asked a taxi driver to take us to a bar near Ground Zero where women cops hang out after work, because I was trying to figure out how to find them and how to track them down. And the first person we met in that bar, Carol Pochner, she came to me, at the bar on crutches and with bandages on and everything else. This was like 2 weeks after the attacks. And she had just come that day from her police precinct where they had a photo op with politicians and different people, because some rich person or some celebrity had donated this trip to Hawaii for a police officer and that police officer's family, this whole expense paid trip. So Carol, the day I met her, was in this photo op at the police precinct, standing next to the guy that got the full ride to Hawaii for him and his family. And she's standing there on crutches and with bandages from all her injuries from 9/11. And Claire, that cop that got that trip wasn't even in New York on 9/11. He wasn't even at Ground Zero. But the way that the favors got passed down through the male-dominated police department is people give the favors and give the gifts to the people they like. And so this was the kind of thing that people were experiencing. That day that I met her in the bar and told her we were there to find the women heroes, she cried, which I came to find out is highly unusual for a New York City cop to do in public in a bar. She cried and she said, "You're the first people that have even asked us about our experiences." So it ended up meaning a lot to them. And I think it was very healing for them. And they still can't get over it, that I'm still traveling and showing my PowerPoint movie and selling books and talking to people about the women at Ground Zero. They can't believe that almost 20 years later, people still care. It means a lot.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I think just how appalling that happened and nobody called it out at the time apart from you.
Yeah, but Claire, it's interesting because I've given it a lot of thought, because I don't think anybody did anything purposefully in leaving out the women. I think that collectively we sort of regressed to a more childlike state. And if you think about it, at that time in our history, most of us as adults, when we were kids, we did not have any female role models in any of those male-oriented, traditionally male fields, right? So you're so scared, you just had this terrorist attack, you're thinking of the big, strong fireman of your childhood, right? That's going to carry you down the steps. I think that's what happened. I think it was sort of a collective regression to some sort of childlike state where the big, strong man was going to come save you.
Mm.
But
Very
and also just,
generous.
you know, decades and decades of history of women being marginalized and not being acknowledged for their accomplishments had a lot to do with it too.
Yeah. I suppose I'm just trying to remember back because I was in England at the time that happened, and I was just so focused on how terrible it was, and the dramatic pictures. I suppose I didn't really focus on specifically on whether men or women were doing
Right.
as people.
But you know what's funny about
I didn't.
Claire, that's the same thing everybody's told me, like when we go out and do these talks and all that, and people say the same thing. I think the reason that I got so angry about it is because I was supposed to do something about it.
Yeah.
Like I think sometimes you're given this real passion so that you can make it happen, because there was supposed to be acknowledgement of them. They did need a book written about them, and I was able to do it. And so I was given that anger that just propelled me forward. That
Amazing.
anger is
It's
very
that
valuable.
story again, isn't it? That this was your gift. You know, like you got Ellie giving you the liver, which does feel very much like it was a pre-life agreement of some kind. That he was absolutely meant to give that to you, and then you were absolutely meant to write this for the women. I mean, what a gift to them!
Right.
And is it still available to buy, by the way?
Oh yes, yeah. It's available on Amazon and HSN and all that stuff. Yeah.
Perfect. Women at Ground Zero. So go to Mary's website and you can presumably find it there as well.
Yeah, definitely. But it meant a lot to me, and it really showed me what you can do if you act on your passion without hesitation. That's the biggest thing I learned about that. Because how many times in my life have I thought about doing something and then started to hesitate? How much is it going to
yes,
cost?
I do that all the time.
How much time is it going to take? What kind of resources is it going? And before you know it, you've given up, and you think, oh well, somebody else will do it anyway, right? And this time with the project, I was so angry, I was so furious that I was going to write this book no matter what, and it sort of propelled me forward to do it. So I think the anger was very useful.
But that is so true, though. My husband and I often, I mean, you know, singularly and together, we have really good ideas, we feel really passionate about something, or let's do that, and then life just intervenes, or let's have a cup of tea or something, and then and as you're right, you think of all the things, that the obstacles, if you like, that you have to overcome in order to do it, and then you just think, oh, and I don't know.
I mean, Susan and I, the night that we decided to write the book was the night that I screamed at the television set, and Susan had said to me, you know, you're going to have to calm down because there's nothing we can do about it. And that was it. That was the moment when she said there's nothing we can do about it. We both just sort of shocked at that statement because it's such a lie, right? There's always something you can do about something. We looked at each other and we were like, what could we do? And we determined to write the book. We made the decision that night to do it. And it was, I would have left my career. I would have sold my house and used the money to finance the project. I would have really done anything at that point. And it showed me what you can make happen if you fling yourself into something and don't let those reservations or hesitations get in the way.
How nice. Well, that is such an amazing philosophy for anybody, isn't it? Whether, however big or small they want to do something, just do it.
But it's hard. I mean, right now I want to do this free web series on public speaking. And so I have all the information up here, right? I have like 30 years of experience that I'm going to do in this web series, but it's just a matter of getting it cracking, isn't it? Getting down to it, doing your curriculum, writing it out, getting it done. It takes a lot.
Well, look, writing a book is, I mean, it sounds amazing. Oh, I'm going to write a book, but it's bloody hard work. I've written a book and it's taken me 10 years of hard slog. Because also you don't start out as a brilliant author. You have to get there slowly.
Right.
And in a year.
And the publisher that we got wanted the book to get out quickly before all the other books about women heroes came out. And so we rushed to get it out by the year anniversary of 9/11. And yes, it was the first book about the women heroes and the only one. There's been like 700 books about 9/11, and ours is the only one about the women heroes. So
still the only one about the women heroes.
So we needn't have rushed it as we did. I mean, at the time I was working full time. I was getting up at 4 a.m. to call New York and do interviews and do editing, and then go to work at Child Protective Services and come home and edit some more. It was a very intense year. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can imagine. I know how hard it is to write a book. It's takes a lot of work, and that's not always necessarily the fun bit. The fun bit is having the idea to write the book, or do some of it, and then it gets a bit boring and tedious, doesn't it?
But you know what's funny? When you're on a passion project like that, like I was angry, we were going to do it. We put our heads down, we got it done. And then I remember I was driving to a retreat. I was going to this Yogananda retreat in Grass Valley, and I get a call from the publisher. The books have shipped, books are out. And I'm driving, and all of a sudden I realize, oh my God, people are going to read this book. They're going to read it. People are going to read it. Critics are going to say things. People are going to have opinions. There's going to be like I hadn't thought about any of it. I never thought about the final product of the book. It was all conceptual. It was like, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm going to address this problem. This is how we're going to put it together. And then once it was all done and it was out in the world, it was sort of terrifying to have such a big chunk of yourself. Like, here, world, go ahead and comment on my life, blood, sweat, and tears here. It was something.
It is. It's very different. When I've been published in a few anthologies, and at the time you're writing, you're trying to make them the best you can. But it wasn't until I had my first one published and looked at it and thought, oh my God, I should have worked so much harder. It's nowhere near my best work. It was my best at that moment on that day that I could be asked to do, because I wanted to go off and do something else probably. But it wasn't the best I could do.
But that's the way it is with creativity, though, isn't it? Yeah.
You can't bring it back again, can you? Like, shit, that wasn't my best.
I know. But everything you do, like, I can't look at any of my past work. I hate everything I've ever done. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so much better now, right? And then I'll watch something that I'm doing now 5 years from now and go, God, I was crap. Did you see that? Because you're always getting better.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Yeah.
And also we see all of our own little mistakes that other people don't see,
Yes, I know. Well, that's amazing, Mary. Thank you so much. You're just so interesting. I could talk to you forever. In fact, I'm going to have you back on again, I'm sure. So in the meantime, if you want to get hold of anything about Mary, whether have her as, she hires herself out as a keynote speaker, she tells stories, she's a comedian, and she's written this amazing book. So if you need to, it's marycarouba.com. I'll leave notes everywhere so that you can link so you can get to her website.
And I am consulting with people one-on-one too, people that want help with their public speaking. And so I'm going to be working with people individually too. And
the best way to do that is to go to your website or to email you?
Yes, either way. Either. Okay,
and what's your email address?
It's mcarouba@gmail.com. mcarouba@gmail.com. Or you can just go to my website, marycarouba.com, and send an email through the website.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mary.
You can send any cash, you can send directly to my house. Thank you.
Yes, and I don't mind. I'm happy to have a truck pull up outside my house too.
Oh, a truck? You're ambitious.
Yes.
Well, a little pickup.
Anyway, thank you, Mary, and chat to you soon. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Thanks, Claire. Bye.